Well, thank you again to you all for your insights this afternoon. I wanted to begin this part of the afternoon by picking up on a theme that each of you touched on in different ways. Marianne, you mentioned when you were commissioned to build the house that you spoke of a reticence given how intimate a place, a home kind of is. You also touched on those themes, Lili, as did you, Andrew, in terms of when, what you're looking for when you go to a hotel and the kind of intimacies you're looking for there. I wanted to ask kind of how difficult, in terms of being too smart with technology when you are trying to sort of make something that is either a home or a resting place for a night or two, or somewhere that is ultimately going to sort of provide care for someone in a certain way as well. How difficult, given how quickly technology changes, how difficult it is to make sure that that sort of framework kind of lasts, I suppose, and creates that kind of, ensures that intimacy in whatever context survives.
I think technology is getting smarter itself, but I think, people have invested in their homes on very sophisticated systems that are plugged into your home, and then knowing how to use them is a challenge. And at the same time, if you think of an audio system that may be wired into your home a few years ago, relative to what you can do with a Sonos speaker that you can plug into the wall and use with your iPhone, I think the investment is, I tried to say it a little bit, and I'm impressed with the Kohler bathroom systems. I think we could have done with more of those smart systems, as long as they're workable, as long as you know how to make them work, as long as the difference between her using the bathroom versus him using the bathroom is actually easily accommodated, and all the fooling around that happens in the shower between his temperature and your temperature kind of thing. I think getting technology to be smarter and more intuitive. And I think, as I said it before, as technology serves such a gamut of generations, I think we have to find solutions that work across the generations, from people who didn't play video games to people who do play video games. There's quite a differential in how we can adapt or how we use those technologies, being able to use them.
I think you're right. I think we're still in the early innings of this in terms of the evolution of technology in the home. And, just in our intelligent products, some are on the second, third, fourth generation, and now getting connected and designing full experiences. And I think it's very natural for the design community around the world to be a little careful in introducing too much technology until it's really proven. Because at the end of the day, design is about an amazing consumer experience. Mm-hmm. And we have to make sure that the technology can deliver on that experience, mm-hmm. and be comfortable and intuitive. And I think in the dream I would imagine we all share for the future, you have a beautiful home or a beautiful space, and the technology is invisible. The products are intuitive, they're adapting, there's machine learning, and everything is controlled through voice or action intuitively, and you really don't have to see the technology. You feel the technology because it controls your environment and adapts. And I think that's where we're going, where homes and spaces and commercial buildings will still be beautiful and warm with all the color, material, finish, fabrics, textures, but technology will be there embedded, making the experience better and more enjoyable.
To lead on from that, Andrew,
yeah,
you had a point to make, I think.
I think I might be mic'd.
Yeah.
You guys can hear me? Okay, great. I hope it doesn't sound reductionist, but when there is so much new innovation, you have to really distill what exactly it's pushing forward, what sort of either human faculty or human emotion or what it's trying to get at. And so when I think of things like machine learning, as you just mentioned, I think of improvements in prediction or preempting behavior. When I think about things like blockchain, I think about trust and how we currently leverage trust in our day-to-day lives. And it sounds a bit reductionist. These things are incredible. There's so many possibilities, but it really does help you frame why you might use something in a particular moment, right? They're all tools. They're all a means to an end, as I was mentioning. And so I'm fascinated by each one. I think the Internet of Things is incredible. I also think that the Internet of Things, essentially under the surface, is just really one thing firing off an event to another thing, trying to anticipate what might need to happen next. And so the situations maybe where I would look at employing that are ones where you can enjoy a little forgiveness. You probably don't want to employ those in situations that can't afford to have an event not fire correctly, right? And so just sort of really simplifying things a little bit can help you understand when the moment might be here to endeavor down like a trial path with something. Anyway,
Lili, in that same vein, I wonder how much what Andrew just mentioned resonates with you. I was interested by what you said about the huge investment in research and the huge advances, in laboratories that have taken place in the field that you work in, yes. But the very little of that quite often translates into the marketplace. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that, why you thought that was, and whether that was changing.
I hope it's changing. It's something we certainly are changing. And I see a real, this is probably the first time this is going to be vocalized. I haven't vocalized this, but I see a real paradigm change happening. It used to be that, the old adage, necessity is the mother of invention. But I think for a long time now, we realize invention has become creates necessities that we never imagined, that we didn't think we would require this particular piece of technology until we get into it, and then now we can't live without it, right? So the reverse is happening, and in the field that I work in, which is in health, it's aging, it's dementia, it's not sexy at all. It doesn't sell universally designed homes. You have to sell the elegance, and then people move in, and then they realize later down the road, when they are disabled temporarily even, that they actually have a home that's accessible, right? But it's the elegance that always attracts people. And this is what sells. And I think that I've accepted that. And I think it's really important because seniors, older people, people who are no longer sexy, should have access to elegant ways of living, because the non-institutional elegant kinds of objects that we use, even a walker or a wheelchair, needs to make us feel good. And I think we're starting to see that. I have some very young clients who have been motor vehicle accidents. They want to live in downtown. They want to be able to, and they have acquired these beautiful wheelchairs that even our young boys are envious of. They want a spaceship-like chair like that. So I think there is a paradigm that is shifting. The other thing, from necessity versus, the other thing that I think, because we're not a sexy field, we don't get a lot of funding, and the funding we often can misuse in terms of doing research, as I've described, and don't communicate with the market, is then what our team is starting to do is we're riding on the coattail of industries and commercialized products that are very well funded, like the entertainment industry. So now, if you read the literature, there is a lot of virtual reality types of applications used in health to help individuals, particularly the population going through palliative care, to help them in the last days of their lives live with a level of quality and beauty, and be able to access places they used to visit that they're no longer able to visit. That all came from the entertainment industry, not from a lot of hard research dollars focusing on what palliative care should have, right? So I think we're starting to see all this blurring of boundaries and taking opportunity, being an opportunist and taking what's out there. And then the real ingenuity and creativity now is teaching our students, the future generations, care providers, to see where the opportunity is and then ride that and bring it into the care sector.
That blurring of boundaries, what kind of challenges has that brought from your vantage point so far? And it sounds like it is bringing a lot of opportunity with it too.
Yes. Some of the challenges we're overcoming very quickly because there's now new fields of employment that I had never seen before. And this is just in the last 5 years. We're seeing, I'm getting computing science young people coming to me and saying, I want to work with you. This is the field I want. It used to be that engineers and computing science disciplines would only focus on coding, but now they want to make a difference. They want to see that what they're developing actually affects everyday life. They're starting to think about social constructs and how to make a difference in the real world, rather than even the ones who are sort of on the spectrum. They see the value of their work and how the real world can actually use it. And it's products like this that make them excited, I think.
I think connecting to what you're talking about, connecting to the design industry and design excellence is such an important. So, one of the things that's happening in Toronto is the connection between the business schools and the art colleges, OCAD University and the Rotman School of Business.
That's
and I think bringing those, because it is, my pitch would be for design excellence, for making things that are beautiful, and whether they are geriatric chairs or their wheelchairs or their devices. Like, it was quite dispiriting to think that you might fall and not be able to push the button because the button wasn't raised from the surface. So I think, that industrial design excellence, and I think demographics will push this very hard and engaging others in this exercise. So if there's a school of design, and there is the Alberta College of Art and Design, but reaching out to those so that we get better products that are more appealing. So a disability is no longer a disability
Or a handicap.
or a handicap. It is actually access. It makes it's accessibility.
Yes,
So that's the kind of shift, and that's what technology can support, and that's, I think, where we need technology most.
Yes. So back to your question, I think it still is a challenge, the language and the cross-disciplinary and understanding what each other can do. But I think we're very quickly overcoming that. We're seeing degrees being created at the University of Alberta. For example, we have a computing science and humanity called HUCO, Humanities and Computing Science degree, graduate degree. So we have computing science students going into humanities. Like, these typically in the past were ones who couldn't write papers, and they would go into computing science. Now they're actually writing really elegant, and it's all about design and elegance. And I think that's really become the new pedestal that people are trying to strive for because of how it makes people feel.
Well, that sort of brings us back to your presentation, Richard, this notion of elegance and usefulness, and as kind of notions of, the roles technology should and can play, both in a sort of practical context, but also in sort of the way we make me feel, not me personally, but all of us here. What's that kind of friction like when you're looking at designing a new product, or you're trying to fix a new sort of solution in the product design sector? How do those things marry up? What are those sort of discussions like?
Yeah, I want to echo what I think Andrew talked about in his presentation, is the conflict sometimes in the process of doing something good and versus the process. There's always conflict, but I think it's important that we have to have an open mind and basically trying to learn things and do things iteratively and prototype, right? Basically, you learn by failing. That's the only way you can actually adjust and adapt to the technology in this, this new era of changes. I think that, we kind of trying to resist it, we will be basically left in the Stone Age very, very quickly. And I also think that it's really, really hard to define what that future is. You have to somehow work with it fluidly. And hopefully, we will be able to kind of put design and also research to understand, the user's experience. I think at the end of the day, technology, like David's mentioned earlier, should be kind of quiet and calm, is there to really delight the consumers. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've done. We've created a lab, a smart home lab. We have a global team working on it, but we have a smart home lab in Kohler, Wisconsin, so we're constantly creating different experiences and tearing down products and putting in new products and reconfiguring the products so we can fully understand what that experience is like. And we think it really can transcend ages too. We think technology actually, can be very appropriate for young people, but create amazing benefits for aging people as well, in terms of easier control for arthritic conditions and a variety of different benefits that we're starting to learn. And I think that's one of the great things about technology. It's not just for younger millennials. It's really can create benefit across the spectrum. And really finding those areas of greatest benefit and opportunity is what we're really all about, and how we think about it and bring it to market more along the lines of experiences versus just individual technologies. But I must say, as a frequent user of our intelligent, just even the discrete intelligent products like intelligent toilets or a digital thermostatic valve and a digital shower, the individual experiences are really evolving fast to create things that haven't existed before. But then bringing it all together in a more intuitive, connected way is the next level.
I'd love to bring in the audience here very shortly, but I'd love to just dwell on that point about the individual, David, that you made. And you mentioned it, Marianne, about the settings that you like your shower or your husband likes his shower, those kind of things. Are those kind of individualities kind of easier to strike now? Are we getting to a place where, given that things might be becoming sort of slightly more universal, that actually kind of tailoring them to what you want from a bathroom or from a room that's going to make sure it knows kind of if you fall or if you need care, or a room that you are staying in overnight? How close are we to sort of getting to a sort of a real sort of individualized sort of experience?
Well, we think personalization is really the essential element, and so at the Consumer Electronics Show next January in Vegas, our whole approach will be around personalization and how presets and individual settings and really being able to sense my voice versus Richard's voice or my daughter's voice and adapt the room based on individual voice recognition. Things like that is really where we're going. So you can personalize your whole experience based on who you are versus somebody else in the family.
Well, if anyone in the audience here would like to chip in at this point, do raise your hand. My colleague Will is standing there in the shadows, but he won't be in the shadows for much longer. If anyone would like to answer a question.
One here too.
Oh, we have one here too. There's a gentleman in the front here wearing the blazer. If you just keep your hand up, sir, that would be fantastic. And if you'd like to introduce yourself as you ask the question, it would be great to know.
What is this? Oh, that's fantastic. I thought this was my prize. Yeah. Okay.
The prize is to come, actually.
I'm Ramson Kachi from KOHLER Design Group in Oakville. And the technology aspect is very interesting to me. I find technology has a sweet spot. Too little is useless, too much is useless. And I think meeting that sweet spot where people are comfortable using it. Too much, you tend to cater to techies. And we saw that about 10 years ago when we were doing a lot of home automation where perhaps one partner, the husband, would love this stuff and then the wife wouldn't touch it because there'd be a fear of making things not work. So there's platforms that have been fighting over time to be the platform that everybody uses. And I know Kohler has a lot of technology in their products. Do you guys look at, number one, do you guys look at the platforms that are kind of becoming the ones that are becoming the accepted ones? Do you look at integrating that so that your products are more integratable to outside products, for one? And two, we're all talking about our personal environments and how we use them. Is there any talk about mobility in these technologies where we travel to friends' homes? And you mentioned Sonos, and when we go into a house that has Sonos, if you're one that uses Sonos, you get excited because all of a sudden you have a Sonos app and you can integrate with that system, and you're at a friend's house and you can be involved. So if you were to go to a friend's house who has a Kohler DTV system and the app is on your smartphone, and all of a sudden that system would recognize who you are and you're using that shower, your technology is there with you, your settings are there with you. So is there any thoughts of making it broader and mobile in that respect?
I think both questions are really good. The first one is about technology platforms, and we really want to be agnostic and integrate into the largest, whether it's Amazon or Google or some of the large Chinese platforms. We want to be able to integrate on all the largest platforms around the world, so that doesn't become an obstacle in terms of the implementation of the technology. Regarding personalization, we're a little careful about going to your friend's house because you could have fun with that. But we think in the hospitality business, particularly, and preset shower experiences. So if one of the flags, as we're in discussions with, would take in a digital thermostatic showering system for Kohler, we could have preset experiences that are app-based, that consumers traveling as part of their loyalty programs could have when they go to different hotels, and that would allow them to have their own personalized experience that travels with them, things like that. But your idea on that residentially is possible. We just have to make sure we're not breaching the cybersecurity privacy issues. I mean, that's when we start bringing technology into your most personal space, you want to be really careful who has access to that technology and keeping it safe and secure. So we look at that as really one of the most paramount things we have to do in how we design the security infrastructure around that.
Yeah, I just want to kind of build on David's point. While we love the idea of personalization, but I think we're taking a kind of measure, curated approach. It's almost like you ask there's the Apples and there's Android and there's iOS. One is kind of closed, one is open to everybody, right? But then, when you're open to everyone, then basically you invite a lot of things that you don't want into the system. So I think we're gonna prefer to have the more kind of curated, but yet, we can work with some other bigger platforms like the Amazons and the Googles of this world. So.
I have a slightly different view on personalization. I just think we're farther from it than we realize. Largely because of the way that the algorithms around us are learning these days. So it's, when you feed behavioral data into an algorithm, it's going to get very good at predicting that same behavior out the other end. And it really just sort of fine tunes on that vector. And so that's how you end up with a Facebook news feed that gets narrower and narrower over time, or a Netflix recommendation set that starts to think you want to watch the same exact thing in different forms. I think personalization will start to show up when maybe we've solved some of the privacy crises around our data, because frankly, we're all still holding the most important keys to personalization in our back pocket, which are the things that make us who we are, right? Our attitudes, our values, our beliefs, our ideologies, etc. And that data is not yet on the table, and I think that will be an important unlocking event for personalization.
And what would need to change for that moment to arrive, Andrew?
I think trust is central to that. There's ways of backing into it as we can achieve by virtue of maybe the voice platforms. If we can get very good at inferring who's in a room, we can start to maybe reconcile this behavior with this person. But even then, we're still fine-tuning a particular behavior over and over rather than acknowledging the person as an array of different interests, right? So.
We do have time for a few more questions, so if anyone in the audience would like to raise your hand, make yourselves known.
Somebody in the back there.
Fantastic. If you could introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Hi there, this is Will from Gannell Homes, and first of all, I just want to thank the panel for the time and the information. It's always appreciated, so thank you guys. A couple of things. I'm a big fan of technology, and thank you, Kohler, for the opportunity to do this. Because one of the struggles that I personally constantly have is no matter, similar to the gentleman's point, no matter how much you try to inquire or be in the know, there's just too much for you to know. Too much out there for one to grasp. So the issue kind of becomes that, let's say in a loyalty program where a certain chain may have a Kohler product that can then integrate to a system that you're already using, becomes familiarity where we're just not even aware. As a home builder, I try to be innovative. I try to be in the know. I try to be ahead of the curve. But sometimes the information is just not there. Kohler constantly surprises me I know several people on the staff, and I constantly ask questions, and no matter how many questions I ask, I'm always bombarded with an array of information that I just don't know. So that's me. Now take that into a consumer realm where they may want the technology that's out there, but they just do not know about it. And piggybacking on the point that the gentleman made earlier, in terms of an open forum and everything, it'd be great if my settings from my home can transfer over to the hotel, but I may not know about it. So in terms of exposure, in terms of advertising, what's being done for the general public?
Well, that's a good question. I think I think we're still, as I said before, in the early stages of really driving this. We've started with kind of smart products, intelligent, discrete products. Now we're into connected, and we just going to the Consumer Electronics Show for us this year was a big deal. It was really interesting to us, the global publicity we had. As a trusted brand, we weren't expected necessarily to be showing up at the Consumer Electronics Show. But when people saw us there, and I think it was very natural, and it was pretty amazing because they could see us in our domain, which we're very trusted, being able to drive technology. And I think, versus a tech company trying to get into a personal space and deliver an experience, it's much more difficult, I think, and less natural than a trusted brand to embrace the technology into the consumer space. So I think to answer your question, we have to do a better job as we go forward in the months and years ahead to really make the smart home, the smart bathroom, this type of experience more of the expected norm. We absolutely believe that this is the future of these spaces in the home, 100%. And our growth rates are showing that around the world. So it's just a matter of continuing to inform and communicate and make them easier to install. That's the other thing. We have to make all of these products more intuitive and easier to install so we can drive the market adoption faster.
Lili, I'd like to bring you in here. That seems as though it would resonate in your field as well. Do you find a gap between kind of people who could really benefit and have an intensely improved quality of life from products that they actually don't know exist at the moment? How do you go about in the field of research and sort of getting the word out from your vantage point?
Being part of the AgeWell, which is we're in our fourth year, it's Canada's, it's a network of centers of excellence consisting of about 300 researchers across the country. And our main mandate was commercialization. We have quickly, I think within the first couple of years, realized we're not doing a very good job as academics. We never were trained to get into the commercial. And that the best successes that we have seen to date has been to partner with existing or SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises that are emerging, who are good at what they do, such as Kohler and such as other well-branded companies that want to embrace technology. And we work with them in bringing the applications to health and to social connectedness, to address the mental health issues in the community, the cognitive, rather than trying to do both, trying to commercialize and also dealing with the health, addressing the health issues.
We have time for a final question, I think, from the audience. If not, I have one up my sleeve. Well, I'll ask it, and if anyone would like to ask a final question, please do. But Andrew, it was a notion that you brought up in your presentation, this idea of sort of friction between sort of the person and the technology at hand. And I thought the way you articulated this idea when you were developing the technology for the annex, this idea of that you're employing people in maybe a smarter way, that when people go to stay at a hotel, they want to engage with the person who's there. They want to know the neighborhood that they're staying in. They want to know why the rooms they're staying that evening are different. How much of a sort of challenge was that for you did it feel like quite a basic thought actually in terms of being, well, look, we can actually improve these processes so the people in our buildings can really sort of, give the guests an experience. It's not just a place to sort of lay their head down at night. I'm just interested to know kind of whether you sort of found any opposition to sort of that, and whether it felt like quite a sort of refreshing experience, I suppose, to try and reimagine kind of those roles within a hotel.
So I have the benefit that we're not open till next week, so everything I'm going to say is speculative on how this all goes down.
We won't hold you, don't worry.
But listen, I think anyone who's ever studied change management or anyone who's ever had to pick up and learn something, all of us in this room, we understand that friction and change are a part of life. And so the goal is not to remove friction, the goal is to be intentional about where and how you introduce it into the process, and then to ensure you have the right supports for that. And so we've done this with the hotel. We fully expect there to be consequence of where we've placed the friction, and we hope that we have developed the right processes for that moment. And that can just as easily be around how you cradle an iPad in bed when you're watching a movie, or that could be in how you are able to enter the hotel and discover your room and get in without having to even acknowledge a hotel staff person. And so you just have to kind of consciously say, or expect that we're going to introduce this here. We hope it goes this way. If it doesn't go this way, like we'll continue to patch and patch and patch. But we believe that this is the right moment to put the friction in place, because if we can iterate and if we can experiment, it does unlock new possibilities for us. And for us, that means more bandwidth, more time for a different nature of interaction with the guest.
And I just guess leading off on that for a final brief closing thought from each of you. The idea, what each of you have spoken about this evening is ultimately how we as people, I think, interact with technology that is sort of doing things that we couldn't sort of imagine, kind of not that long ago. Do each of you, from your various fields, feel as though that balance is in, to coin a phrase, I think it was your phrase, so the sweet spot, in terms of the way technology does kind of weave itself into our lives in either the places we call home or our workplaces, or the places we go and stay when we're away from home too? Is the balance right at the moment? I can put you, Andrew, on the spot if you want to start us off.
I'm excited. I think the balance is right. I think there are enough shiny objects to fascinate us all, and I'm very interested to see the trajectories they have before them. At the same time, maybe it's a privileged experience, but I don't feel like technology is serving me in an unhealthy way, except for perhaps my phone screen, which I'm learning to get better at. But I think we're in a good spot.
Lili, that question to you.
I can't quite remember the question, but I think
last
words, is the balance healthy? I think the balance is, it depends on your perspective, and it depends what generation you are, but it's constantly changing. I will just make a pitch that the baby boomers have just turned 65, and if any of you have read Boom, Bust, and Echo, they are driving the market whether you like it or not. And that today's older adults is not going to be the same. Even this baby boom generation is not going to be the same as you progress, 10 years at a time, a decade at a time. So we have to constantly stay on our toes, but I think that it's really exciting times, and I would encourage people to recognize the balance that is comfortable for them, but also recognize that it's going to constantly change. And to go out of your comfort zone, to network with people out of your own discipline, because you'll be surprised what your designs, how it can be applied and open up a whole new market that you never would have recognized. I've seen that over and over again.
Marianne, is that something that resonates with you?
Yeah, so my comment would be from an infrastructure perspective about thinking about putting systems into a house or into a commercial situation, is you need to have them be adaptable, that once you put them in, they can't be fixed. So what I see is that more and more access has defaulted to an iPhone, and that is something that you can carry around, and it makes the system adaptable. It's the hard wiring, I think, that has of systems that are difficult to run, the kind of 10 years ago infrastructure that still remains in many of our homes that we don't use anymore, because you can just plug something in and take an app and adjust it. So I think that adaptability has to be built in, and we should be very cautious about what kind of infrastructure we're putting in, because we may not need that kind of deep hardwiring. And to the developer or contractor who was asking a question, I think those are really important issues. It's very expensive, and cost is a very big issue in terms of the investment into any architectural project. So that adaptability and flexibility and lightness, I think, is critical.
For you, Richard, that lightness in terms of when you're designing things, are you at a sort of sweet spot there, would you say, at the moment?
I'll take a slightly different angle to answer this question. As designers, you have to, first of all, be open-minded to changes, to embrace it instead of resist it. And, using empathy to really put yourself in the user's point of view. And no better users actually are like kids. So I actually learn from my kids because obviously I didn't grow up with technology and they do. So their adaptability of technology is just so much more advanced than I. So I always look to them, talk to other people's kids to understand what's going on. Because, if you become the expert, then probably there's no progress. Sometimes you have to kind of free your mind to kind of look at things from a child's eyes.
A closing thought to you.
Yeah, I would just say thank you all for being here. I think there's no more exciting time in history than where we are right now. And as Lili's chart showed how fast technology is moving, we're seeing it in our own lives. It's an incredible time. And hopefully we can vector it in the right direction to make society and consumers' lives better. But thank you all for being a part of our discussion today. We really appreciate it.
Please join me in thanking all of our panelists today: Andrew Peake, Lili Liu, Marianne McKenna, Richard Conn, and David Kohler. And thank you very much to all of you for joining us here this afternoon.